for you all. It's from the Honorable Babel On from the Global Renewable Congress. Sophia?
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Babel Höhn. I'm chair of the Global Renewable Congress. That is a network of parliamentarians worldwide, cross-party, with the goal of 100% renewable energies. I'm doing this job since 8 years. And before that, for 10 years, I was minister in the biggest state of Germany, in North Westphalia, in charge of environment, agriculture, and a lot of other issues. And after that, 12 years, a member of federal parliament in Germany. And in the last 8 years, special representative for energy in Africa and in the global south. Why I am supporting renewable energies for such a long time? Because I am convinced that renewable energies are the future. And we can see it now with the war in Ukraine and the conflict in Iran, that the prices for fossil fuels, for gas and oil, are increasing. When we are producing our own energy with our sun and our wind, we are more independent. Germany, for example, is paying 80 billion euro every year for importing fossil fuels. But the energy transition is not easy. For example, you in Pakistan, you have a lot of energy companies who are heavily indebted because the old contracts with fossil fuels don't cover the costs. They were too expensive. Now you have to look to convince the people for this transition that they have more benefits. But there are a lot of people who are working in the fossil sector, and you must give them a perspective too. So what we have to do is to convince the majority of the people of our new way. We have now some data, for example, with the prosperity plans, and we can debate how can we convince the majorities in our countries. And that's why I would like to say to you, best wishes for your Congress, a lot of success to find solutions and to convince the people. Otherwise, we would not be successful. So good luck.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll just quickly start now. So one of the things that happened over the last few months is that suddenly Pakistan emerged largely unscathed in the context of electricity, despite the war in the Middle East and the blockade of Strait of Hormuz. And that was largely because massive solarization that happened in the country, a lot of behind-the-meter solarization that happened, and that also allowed us to avoid a lot of LNG imports as well. So I think this is where we are going to anchor our conversation around, as in, does this mean we have much better energy security now? And if that is the case, what more needs to be done to further strengthen this case? I would ask Uwe to really comment.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much to all. First of all, thank you very much for Dawn to having over here, because my point would be as this esteemed audience and this platform itself, because just 1 minute to spend on what is Dawn is obviously from the mouthpiece of Pakistan. What is being discussed on this forum should have to be that rock solid that it has an impact of what is being discussed as not just a panel. It's, as I heard earlier, action speaks louder than the words. So what is right now the case would be is that, and I've heard something outside, sitting over there, that there's a great works happening on the space of this climate change or this current situation which is evolving. But what is missing is a connect. Many people outside in the world don't know that what's going on. So coming back to the topic, which is obviously is like revolving around the breath on the air is, since I'm from the energy sector and energy is the lifeline of it, as what you say, that here you need, as some foreign contents are there, so I'll not keep all mostly in the English, that it is सांस जीने के लिए सांस चाहिए. You need air to breathe it. But to drive a human being, you need energy. And the energy is the lifeline of what is corresponds to this. So Pakistan, as a current state of affair right now, imports around 85 to around 80% of the oil imports, which means which convert both petrol and the diesel, and we being the price which you know all this of. So this is all about energy security. Now, energy security is considered to be the national security as being what is happening right now around the world. So my point, which we'll cover in the next few minutes, what it is, that it is not the security situation now. It's the crisis which is already there. Now, to address that crisis, I wanted to mention some numbers. That's why I've been having it, that what is right now is happening. There's a lot of work happening from where, like I belong to Karachi, and I have individuals who are having great works doing in the line of supporting the action speak out in the world. That right now in a case, right, the government right now in a strategic planning with the Saudis, like let's say about, I'll tell you guys an example, that people say that you need, right now with the conflict, the message comes or a lesson comes that you need the storage, like you mean that you need to store the energy to inform, meaning you need a strategic storages, which is the case. But now, what is the case now? That the energy sovereignty is actually not about storing or importing fuel. It is about producing energy locally. Now, that's where the biggest headline of this conference should have to be the case one in, that from fields to farms, from animals to the waste, one of the two major proponents which we are focusing is biogas and the biomass. Now, the fraction of this imported fuel, or what we call it, is something which is looking for the alternatives. Right now, I'll just give you another example from what is right now happening, that obviously, as I said earlier, that from here to climate change, is this what is the situation is. Now, what is the issue? What is the critical effect? The critical effect is, in the current scheme, is about one is emission. Now, I don't know anybody in my other forums discuss about it, that how the emission problems working in. Now, I'll give you an example, a live example of a daily basis, whoever owns in this team audience, either industrialist or a consultant or whatsoever, that this goes side by side with the two aspects. One is emission and another is pressure on sand water resources. Now, as you know, the greatest emission, now this is something for you guys' knowledge also, and for my other colleagues, that the emissions, the NOx, there's something called NOx and NOx. I don't know how many of people you know that NOx is the worst part of the more dangerous, more than 200% more dangerous than the CO2. Now, how we can draw out of this NOx? Now, NOx is something, and you will be also surprised that Pakistan, being the fourth largest nation by all means now, will be coming soon, that we corresponds to around CO2 of around 584 million tons of a CO2, which corresponds to 10 to 15 billion dollar per an average which exists. And this, what I'm saying, is actually on ground happening. Yesterday, one of our ministers mentioned that we will do this, we will do that. So I have a little bit of an unorthodox approach of taking things, that we are not discussing what is actually being there on. Now, from where this emission comes, the gentleman just mentioned about the EV upcoming phenomena. We have more than 100,000 boilers extend from all the way from Karachi site area to the Port Qasim to the Manga Mandi and whatnot, which corresponds to the emission totaled around $25 billion. And I dare someone to challenge it, that this is the numbers we are talking about in this whole.
It's a pleasure and excellent organization on a topic that is so crucial. I think I'll start by acknowledging the fact that Pakistan has really managed the current crisis in a surprisingly good manner. Like it has managed it surprisingly well. The current fuel crisis in the wake of the Iran war, it has been managed surprisingly well, especially when it comes to a supply point of view. We've not really seen any prolonged shortages or like what we saw when the 2022 crisis happened. We saw crippling energy shortages, load shedding. We haven't really seen anything of that sort yet. And that is thanks to this energy transition that we've been experiencing already. You mentioned, the massive solarization drive that has happened across the country. It is really because of that we're seeing an energy transition shift in the way our economy works. I had a slide to display which shows the exact extent of how renewables have been crowding out fossil fuels. So if we could just have that up here, just a couple of visuals, but it really tells the story of how this shift has been happening.
And
But I mean, if we're unable to have that presented, that's fine as well. But what it basically showed was how final, energy consumption has been shifting. We have a very hydrocarbon dependent economy, but over the past 3 to 4 years, we've seen a consistent decline in fossil fuel consumption, whether it's oil, gas, or coal. And this is basically what really is base load in a very traditional grid structure that we have in Pakistan as well. So what we've seen is a decline in fossil fuel-based consumption over the past 3 to 4 years, and that is because of this rapid solarization drive that we've seen. And if we look at data, we see the shift really happening around the 2021, 2022 mark. That is basically when the Russia-Ukraine crisis happened. As a result of soaring energy prices, we had massive industrial shutdowns. We saw electricity prices go up by 100%, 150% almost. And that's when we saw the shift happening towards renewable energy, mainly rooftop solarization. Luckily, at that time, we had very favorable solar panel pricing from China as well. And of course, we have a very good trade relation with China. So that helped us get the benefits of price declines in China. And Pakistan imported about 50 gigawatts of solar panels from 2021 till 2025. That is a massive number, and out of that, we see that almost 35 gigawatts is already installed across net metered and behind the metered settings. So that is basically what has set the stage for this energy transition. And in a time like this, the current crisis that we're going, this is very, very precious. When there's fuel scarcity, renewables can, every alternate kilowatt hour that we're generating through renewables is precious. So I think I'll just stop there. So these two charts, basically, the one on the right that shows how final energy consumption patterns have been changing over the years, and then on the left, we have our low demand curve that can be seen shifting over the years. And there's a massive daytime drop of almost 7 gigawatts during peak solar output hours. And that really shows how renewables have been shifting patterns from traditional baseload based generation to a more dynamic system. So yeah, I'll stop there.
yeah, thank you, Anir. Really appreciate it and all the work that you've done. Kamran, over to you. So again, you're from the International Renewable Energy Agency. A lot of, I would say, quite a bit of transaction has already happened. In terms of the daytime, we figured it out. There's a lot of there's nuclear coming in, there's hydel, there's solar. Again, nighttime is a problem. What kind of interventions do you think can we have which solves that problem as well?
Thank you very much, Amar, and good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Amar, just to give you a global perspective of what is happening across the world, and then, of course, we can connect to Pakistan, is that, I mean, the transition has been driven by the low cost. So in arena, besides several other subjects, we also hold the repository of data on renewable energy costs. So when we see the trend over the last 10 years, we see a significant decline in the cost of renewable energy. So for example, only solar has dropped around 87% in the last 10 years, drastic. And if you compare it with other fossil fuel-based technologies and options, the cost has been going high. So is the case for wind, which has dropped around 55%. And the most important, you talked about the evening time, the battery storage, which we often also called a missing piece in the energy transition puzzle. The cost has dropped over 90% in the 10 years. And these cost reductions have kind of accelerated the energy transition across the globe, across different economies. Of course, Pakistan is one of the front runners in terms of adoption of renewable energy technologies. So this basically gives us a global landscape of what has happened. So we also collect the data on the capacity, the addition globally. So even it resonates with the cost in a sense that more than 90% of the new capacity addition last year came from renewable energy across the globe. If we see the finance, the number is somewhere around $2.4 trillion across the world, spent poured into the energy infrastructure, and out of 2.4, $1.3 trillion have gone into renewables, power grid, to electric vehicles. So we really see where the world is putting their mind and money in that sense. So coming back to the issue of Pakistan, I mean, our panelists alluded to around 50 gigawatt or above 50 gigawatt capacity imports that have happened. A lot of had already been deployed behind the meters. It is all good on paper, but of course it has created a lot of challenges for the system, which traditionally has remained a central system run by the utility scale power plant, kind of a monopoly from the government as a single buyer and single seller. So I think that the complication it has brought in also the battery imports have kind of increased by eight times in the last 2-3 years, which again shows that those who have installed solar are now kind of switching to put the battery backup as well through hybrid systems to also use that energy during the evening time. Of course, this creates a challenge for the government in the sense that now grid is kind of, I would say, not become redundant, but the supply for the grid is reduced, or demand for the grid is reducing. So government is trying to increase the demand in the industries and other sectors. But the other thing I think we also need to do to have a fair and equitable energy transition is to also have a fair tariff regime. We had a net metering policy in Pakistan recently. It's been kind of moved to net billing policies. I know it's a sensitive topic, but frankly speaking, I'm more of a supportive of that idea. I truly believe that the cost at which we are getting solar at the previous policy is just too lucrative for those people who are putting solar. The equitable aspect comes because for most of the people who are installing solar are also the people who can afford it, who comes from generally a affluent background. So unless and until we have a proper financing schemes available for some people who can't afford it, it will remain an inequitable energy transition. So that financing aspect, I think, is also some of the takeaways we get from other countries in the region, let's say in our neighborhood in India or in Bangladesh. Lastly, I would also, or in fact, last 2 points, I would also want to allude to planning part. If you see, I have gone through the draft of the IG CEP, the Generation Capacity Expansion Plan. I don't know how the final document looks like or whether it's ready or not, but it is still very centrally grid focused based on the utility scale power plant. Distributed energy was considered into it, but only 6,000-7,000 megawatts, which is basically just a fraction of what was imported. So I think we also need to put distribution energy also at the center of planning. And when we do it, we need to move from basically generation planning to system planning, because the time you put distribution energy, you also have to put resources, effort plans for infrastructure, for transmission and distribution infrastructure. And very lastly, I think Sustainable Energy for All is working with the Ministry of Power on integrated energy planning. That again is a very popular concept which has been adopted by different countries across the globe. The idea basically is that when you plan for energy, just don't only plan for energy, also plan for other related sectors like industries, transportation, agriculture, and households. Because energy is just an enabler. If you keep those policies disconnected or plans disconnected, there's going to have a big gap between these two policies, and you will not be able to basically fix the problem. Because, and this is what we are seeing, for example, previously the industrial policies kind of didn't align. We see continuously the grid electricity demand kept on decreasing until January, I think, this year, where there was an increase in demand. So these are some of the takeaways. I mean, we already have covered EV, but I would also want to also say that after solar and now the battery revolution, that
constantly. So we are not really in shortage of technologies. We're not really in shortage of even finance in many ways, because renewable energy is one of the technologies that can that is really affordable and accessible. So what we really need to do is just to mobilize very good policies and also very, very smart kind of like financing mechanisms, so that we can bring these technologies to the people and help them ease their anxiety a little bit. And in China, just to I want to end with some of the latest technologies that came out of China. In March, China had the annual Twin conferences. That's the most important political meeting in China every year. And this year's Twin conference was particularly important because we were discussing China's 15th five-year plan, which would cover how the country would develop the economy in the next 5 years from 2026 to 2030. And one of the key policies that came out of the 15th five-year plan is this thing called zero carbon industrial park. China plans to build 100 national level zero carbon industrial park. This means China is changing the way it looks at renewable energy as well. Before, for example, many of the manufacturing actually is located along the southeast coastal areas where they have the money, they have all the for example, ports to export the equipment or all the products. Nowadays, with zero carbon industrial park, this means a lot of this manufacturing will be moving towards where the renewable energy is. And these places are in the landlocked areas in the northwest part of China. For example, like Inner Mongolia or Gansu province or Qinghai province, where they have a lot of solar, a lot of wind, and also a lot of hydro as well. So once the manufacturing moves close to where the renewable energy is happening, curtailment is reduced, and at the same time, a lot of these jobs are brought over to the landlocked provinces as well, so that the country can achieve a more balanced and harmonious economic development. And I think this is the new area where China will be very, very happy to open up and then share with the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, really appreciate it. That's a wonderful way to sum it all together. Finally, Dr. Naveed, I mean, considering all of this, we've had a discussion outside as well. How do you think the grid needs to evolve, and what do the policymakers really need to do at this point?
Thank you, Amar, and thank you to Dawn Group for inviting me. So I think most of the points have been covered. I would like to take you to the future, 10 years from now, how Pakistan will look like. As we see, as an academic, as a person who works with industry quite a lot, looks at data quite a lot, much of the data that we see it goes public. So that's why we can see something which others at least cannot see yet. So Pakistan's energy transition has 6 chapters, according to our view. The first chapter is the massive solarization that we have seen. The black swan event that triggered it was the Ukraine-Russia war that inflated the prices, and then we see a huge boom of solar. Just to give you a perspective, the solar that Pakistan has installed or imported is more than all the African countries combined. 54 countries combined, whatever solar is installed, Pakistan installed more solar. That's the first chapter. The second chapter is the storage. And storage, I'm including both the batteries, which is the stationary batteries, as well as mobility battery, which is electric vehicles. This particular war that we have just seen has been witnessed was the second black swan event, and the preparations have been going on. It will just catalyze how we'll see the grid. So first solarization set in is the battery. This means that I can now generate an electron, I can store an electron, and then I can use it anytime I want. Which means that the third chapter we are going to see is of microgrids or virtual power plants if they are connected to the grid. Now, our grid does not have that facility, so every facility that we see, maybe every house, every factory, becomes a utility company. Because that's where regulatory, so downside of the meter, there's no regulation yet. So I can be, you can say, I can be a master of my own electron. The fourth chapter is going to be of digitalization, which is AI and digitalization, because I would like to see, as a utility company, if I have my house is a utility company, how my electrons are generated, how they're used, how the solar panel is performing, how the battery is performing. The fifth chapter is going to be energy efficiency and conservation, because I don't want my electron to be wasted. I don't want to have full lowest levelized cost of energy in my electron, whatever I produce. And the sixth, probably the most interesting, most unglamorous, but probably the most, I would say, out-of-box chapter is circularity. Every battery is a mobile mine. every battery has rare earths that everybody is fighting for. So rather than going and opening up a mine, a person like me can have this battery as an asset. So these 6 chapters we are going to witness in the next 10 years if we are going to go this trajectory. There are 3 catalysts that we are looking at it. The first catalyst, it's entirely modular. I can have a small system to a very large system, and that's my call. The second is it's bottom up. We have not used probably a single dollar of climate financing in all this transition. There were many factors that combined together, and those factors are somehow combining again. And the third chapter is China. Third catalyst is China. So I'll just say one final sentence is that in Pakistan, we are seeing a very interesting evolution of the grid that we have not seen in any country, according to my little knowledge. So Pakistan is the first country that's seeing an evolution from a connected grid to a distributed grid. From 2% to 25% electrons that we are now generating are distributed. And this is not just net meter. Net meter is only about 20% of the solar panel. The rest is all distributed. Maybe even we don't know where they are installed, but they are down there, they are out there. So this is how Pakistan's story will evolve as we see it. We don't know whether it happens or not, but this is a very interesting story to watch in the next 10 years. It's good or bad, right or wrong, optimized or not optimized, that we'll have to see. Thank you.
You know, I've always believed that this solarization of Pakistan is probably one of the world's best climate finance stories. And as soon as the government gives us an inch, the private sector and the people of Pakistan take over and really, you know, make change happen. So before we close this,
I would like to add one thing, if you allow, just to close. What Dr. Saab said in the furtherance to this, which is my second one, and yeah, you know, the second thing which besides the emission I wanted to control is the water. What Dr. Saab mentioned about the chapters, the consolidation of the chapters are the most important for CHARP, which should be a takeaway of this brief talk. Population pressure, which is something, you know, one thing very quickly I'll explain. All this warfare, all this, what is happening because of energy. UAE was what was here 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's become 1-2 oil gas reserves, make it over there. Here what we have, which we as a practical implication, the biggest point we miss out of any forum or deliverables are that what we already have. With the 5th chapter or the last, probably Dr. Saab mentioned about biogas or biomass. For us, solar ki baat unhone ki, solar is not something of a very, like a case study for the world, what would be. Solar is never being, or the wind never being used in Pakistan in the last 2-3 decades as being in a drive sustainable manner. वो तो commission agency or solarization, we are the importers market. हमने वो what we need to do कि हमने अपनी indigenous optimization को बढ़ाना नहीं है. तो in short, in nutshell, which I wanted to make a point and impact that there's something which is the pressure on the population is something is the biggest opportunity for us. I'll close with the example. I'd like to give an example of sugarcane. We have around CO2, as I mentioned, around 2030, we have 80 million tons of the sugarcane exists. Now, just imagine the one crop. Although in this audience, there is a gentleman with the 100,000 heads sitting over here with the 10 CFD of the gas potential, with the 40 megawatt of the gas, which we've been talking, which eventually paves the way for the real sustainability which exists in places like in Karachi, which runs Pakistan, but on ground, wasting around 1,000 megawatt on a daily basis on an average, which is never being accounted for. So with that said, one crop of sugar with the 100 billions of the credit card, I think credit card, although carbon credits is like a credit card, and then the focus on this. But at the same audience, I heard that one of the fuel, which is State Bank, doesn't give the financing of the energy one. So what we needed and what I would expect from the takeaway of this conference is that we need to create the environment in which the financing for the poorest of the consumer to all the way from the strategist to the policy maker intervention, the integrated approach is there. Because in short, we have an intent, we have a will, we have a technology exists, and alone this renewables, biomass and biogas can change the horizon of Pakistan energy sector or energy security, for which all this panel is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that hopeful note, I'll request that we turn on a video from Ali Gulchugan, who is from the Global Renewable Congress.
Sorry that we cannot be with you in person today. The current situation in the region made the traveling possible for us. I'm very much grateful to the CVF and Dawn Media for making it possible to join you in this way. My name is Ali Guljagun. I'm presenting on behalf of the Global Renewables Congress, drawing on a new report by our colleague Dr. David Jacobs on Pakistan's solar revolution and what it means for the global south. You are exactly the people this report was written for. I hope it is worth your time. Let me start with something that I think many of you already sense, but the official data has not yet fully captured. Pakistan's official electricity registry shows around 130,000 net metered solar installation, roughly 1.5 gigawatts. That looks manageable. The actual reality is entirely different. Over the past 4 years, Pakistan has imported solar panels from China equivalent to almost its entire power generation fleet, an estimated 17 gigawatts, with 4 to 5 million systems installed. The vast majority are unregistered and invisible to planners. This is not a criticism of any institution or individual. This happened faster than any regulatory system was designed to track. But it means Pakistan's energy planning has been working with the wrong numbers. And that is where we need to start. Why did millions of Pakistani families install solar panels with no government support? The answer, I think, is quite straightforward. The grid was not delivering what people needed. And three things converged at once. First, prices. Grid electricity rose 155% between 21 and 24. Bills in Karachi and Lahore began exceeding a monthly rent. Solar became a financial necessity, not a lifestyle choice. Second, reliability. Load shedding lasted 8 to 12 hours a day in many areas. No cooling in 45-degree heat, no production for industry. The grid was failing to deliver. Third, cost of panels dropped 80% globally. Chinese exports increasing the flow to the global south. Combine those three. The consumer decision is not surprising. It is rational. Where did those unaffordable prices come from? Understanding that is critical. Pakistan introduced capacity payments for private power producers in 1994, a reasonable response to severe electricity shortages at the time. Investors received fixed payments whether their plants generated electricity or not. But look at what that created. The share of Pakistan's electricity tariff going to capacity payments, so simply paying plants to exist, rose from 41% in 21-22 to 61.5% by 23-24. Nearly two-thirds of every electricity bill now goes to power plants barely running, because solar has displaced the need for them. The policy designed to secure affordable electricity became the primary driver of the unaffordability that is now pushing consumers off the grid entirely. The same logic played out in Pakistan's gas supply contracts. Long-term take-or-pay LNG agreements required payment for fixed volumes, used or not. When grid demand fell because millions switched to solar, Pakistan found itself paying for gas it no longer needed. By 25, roughly 45 of 120 contracted cargoes, nearly 40% had to be cancelled. The estimated cost from stranded LNG obligations alone, $378 million US per year. These are not abstract figures. This is the money that could have gone toward grid modernization, education, or health. Instead, it is the fiscal consequence of the contracts signed before the distributed solar revolution that changed the demand picture. It is a warning for every country in this region still signing long-term fossil fuel agreements. For the policymakers in this room, this slide is the most technically important. Pakistan's planning system tracked what official data showed. Registered plants, net metered solar, official imports, historical grid consumption. That is the left side of the slide. What is missed on the right side was 4 to 5 million unregistered installations, over 15 gigawatts of behind-the-meter capacity, rising panel imports never cross-referenced with deployment data, and grid demand quietly falling as consumers self-generated. Pakistan has no mandatory DG registry, no systematic satellite tracking, no import deployment, no cross-referencing. These are not exotic tools. They exist. And without them, accurate national planning is impossible. I want to be constructive here. This is a solvable problem. The recommendations in the report are specific, practical, and implementable without large budget allocations. We will come to them very shortly. Everything I have described leads to one conclusion, and I want to state it directly. For most of electricity history, consumers were captive. No alternative to the grid. Whatever it cost, whatever quality it delivered, the consumers had no choice. That era is now over. In Pakistan and across the global south, consumers now have an alternative. The diagram on the screen shows the shift from captive customers fed by a centralized system to customers who choose between decentralized supply and the grid. The grid remains essential for nights, for winter, for heavy industry, but it now has to earn its customers. Restrictive policies will not reverse this. They will only push more installations off the books. So the question is, what should be done? The report identifies 5 interconnected policy areas. Let me take each one very briefly. First, rate design. Remove legacy costs from bills. Introduce time-of-use tariffs and make grid usage fees flexible enough to compete with self-generation. Second, contracts. No new inflexible take-or-pay agreements. Include volume flexibility in every new power purchase or fuel supply contract. Third, track distributed solar. A mandatory digital registry combined with satellite mapping and import data cross-referencing. Fourth, system planning. Explicitly model distributed solar rollout. Shift from the base load plans to flexible, fast response peaking capacity. Fifth, grid financing. Cover part of grid costs through public budget, not tariff surcharges that push more consumers off the grid. 4 immediate priorities, and I frame these not as external prescriptions, but as recommendations drawn from Pakistan's own experience. 1. Accelerate IPP and LNG contract restructuring. Legacy costs of the electricity bill, not about penalizing the investors. It's about aligning contracts with current market reality. 2. Launch the National DG Registry, digital, simple, mandatory. You cannot plan a system that you cannot see. 3. Introduce time-of-use tariffs, make the grid competitive at the hours solar cannot cover. Evenings, winter, industry peak demand. 4. Treat grid as public infrastructure. Redirect development bank support from generation, where private capital now flows freely, toward transmission and distribution, where it does not. Restrictive policies will not stop Pakistan's solar revolution. They will only make it more chaotic and more costly. Pakistan has something rare, a real-time view of what happens when distributed solar scales faster than the system is ready for. That experience is valuable knowledge for Pakistan and for the rest of the global south. The question is whether policy planning and investment can adapt fast enough to turn that growth into an asset. I believe this beautiful country has the expertise and the will to do exactly that. Thank you very much for your attention.
I think we've had a very loaded discussion on the current problems, the positives, and where to go next. So can I please ask everyone to give a round of applause to our esteemed panelists? Thank you for your time. Could you please rise for a picture, photographer? And ladies and gentlemen, we'll now be breaking for lunch. At 2:15 sharp, we'll be starting our panel on mobilizing Pakistan's private sector. That promises to be very interesting. And I do apologize that our host, Amar, had to leave with a bit of an emergency. Thank you all. Hope to see you in about 35 minutes.